Hello viewers, welcome to part 1 of our port forwarding video series. Okay, so let's try to recap what we did in our last video. So the last video was part 0, which was the intro to port forwarding. Alright, so part 1 we're going to be doing local port forwarding using SSH. Okay, so the remaining parts from part 1 to part 4 are all going to be practical. So we'll be having to do some practical sessions here. So for the practical, I was supposed to set up some labs, okay, where I will expose ports on a local machine, and then we'll try to access them from a remote machine, okay. And then I realized that I could do this from a virtual hacking lab, which is so I'm using the Hack the Box platform. All right, so I'm using the machine Formula X. So Formula X was a hard difficulty Linux machine. So this machine, I solved it already, and then I realized it had a lot of ports once you had a foothold. Okay, so we have the IP address here, and then we can try to ping. Let's ping to see if we can access that machine. All right, so we are having echo responses, so we can access the machine. Okay, so what we're gonna do is we can try to scan the machine for ports. Okay, let's see the ports that we can have access to. So I'm gonna use Rust scan, and then I'll slap the IP here, and then I'll try to increase the speed, the rate, so with 10,000. All right, so Rust scan has started. This is a very fast scanner written in Rust. So it's come out with 2 ports already. So we have port 22 open and port 80. All right, so we have only 2 ports. Okay, so the Formula X machine, we can only access 2 ports from where we are. All right, we can only see 2 ports, but actually the machine has more than 2 ports. So that's where port forwarding, the local port forwarding, is going to come in handy. All right, so what do we do next? I'm gonna try to gain access into the machine, so that let me SSH. I'm gonna use SSH pass, and then the password. I think I have the password somewhere. Let's create. Okay, so this is the password. The password is Manchester United. Okay, and then our SSH using the user from docky at, and then at. So we're gonna, this is the IP address of the machine. All right, so let's see if we can access. So yeah, so we have access to the machine. All right, so this machine, we're able to scan only 2 ports. Okay, let's see if that's the case. So if you want to see, so now we have access to the machine. We've logged into the machine via SSH, and we can try to see whether we have some ports listed internally. So we use SS LMPT. Okay, all right, so you can see that we have so many other ports. So these were the only ports exposed. So you can see that this is like a default route, so every IP address will be able to access this port from a remote location. All right, so you can see that port 22 is also open. It's also exposed to every IP address 000. That's what it means. And then the ports that we are interested in are the local host sockets. Okay, so this is port 3000. It can only be accessed in the local host, that is 127.0.0.1. all right, so these ports we didn't see them when we were doing the scans, so we didn't see this port as well, so we cannot access them. All right, but these ports are actually running some services, maybe web apps or hosting some applications. Okay, so how do we access them? So first of all, when we come and open our browser, let's open our browser and try to access the socket. Let's try to access one of the sockets. Let's try to access this. Okay, let's see what we're gonna get. So HTTP. Yeah, so we cannot access it, okay, because it's removed somewhere, and then the port is not exposed to us. So that's where local port forwarding is going to come in. Okay, so to do our first part 1, we're going to use SSH, to do local port forwarding. So this is easy and straightforward, especially if you have credentials. And then we have credentials, we have username, and then we have password. All right. So with that one, you just do SSH. Okay, tag L. So the tag L signifies you are doing local port forwarding, and then you want to port forward. What are you trying to port forward? So first of all, we have different sockets, but we are trying to do this one first. And then we do, okay, so this is the, and then we try to access the machine. All right, so with the username, and then we say at the IP address. So where is the IP? So this is the IP of the machine. Okay, so we are trying to port forward this IP onto our machine. Let's see if it works. All right. Okay, so bad local port forwarding. So I think we need to add another parameter. Okay, so with the local port forwarding, okay, you have to specify where you are forwarding the port to. Okay, I think that's what we haven't added. So we can check that quite easily by looking at our *0 IP address. So let's say, what am I going to do? IPA, and then we grep for *0. We are looking for this, our *0 IP address. Okay, so yeah, so I think yeah, so what we're gonna do is, yeah, so I think this is what we are supposed to do. All right, so we are going to port forward this onto this particular port. So locally we are going to be listening on this port from this port. All right, so we're going to tunnel all this traffic into port 3000. So I think yeah, we don't even need to use the *0. Let's see if it works. Okay, so now we specify our password, which is Manchester United. All right, so we have been able to SSH into the machine as Frank Doki. All right, but the port forwarding has been done. Okay, so to check if the port forwarding has been done, this is the port that we forwarded, port 3000, on the local host of our remote machine. Okay, so let's try to access the port 3000 again. So if it did right, we should be able to access it. All right, so you can see that we have access to the port now. We have access to the resources on port 3000 on local hosts from the remote machine. All right, so that's how it is done. So yeah, we can try to access another port. So let's try to access this port 8000. So let's try to access port 8000 and see if we can do that. So I'm gonna do 8000. All right, you can see that we cannot access port 8000 because the port hasn't been forwarded. All right, so we can use the same procedure that we used for the port 3000, and then we can port forward port 8000 as well. So what I'm going to do is just to paste it here, but instead of 3000, I'm going to be port forwarding 8000. All right, and then it's asking me for password, and then I put a password. So the port has been forwarded using SSH. So let's go back and try to check port 8000 this time around, and then we can see that we have access to port 8000 now. So yeah, if we have the right credentials for this particular login page, we can log in and try to access the application, even though this application is running on a remote machine with the ports not exposed to us, but by the help of port forwarding, we've been able to access this web app. All right, so that's very fantastic. Like that's very good thing about port forwarding. Okay, so and then we can see that we have other ports. So we have ports 80, 81, 80, 82. So these ports haven't been forwarded. So if we try them as well, we cannot access them. Let's try and see. So this port, I think it's 80, 81. We cannot access 8081, and then we cannot access 8082 as well. All right, so we need to port forward them also. So you can imagine if you have so many ports that you need to port forward, so you have to be doing them one by one. What if you have 1,000 ports, or let's say 100 ports? Let's be conservative, let's say 100 ports. And it's gonna be very tedious to be port forwarding them one by one. Okay, so we have to find other smart ways of doing it. All right, so another technique I'm going to show here is, let me exit from here, let me exit from this. So another technique, I'm going to try to port forward these two ports at the same time. All right, let's see if we can port forward two ports at the same time. So it's going to follow the same process. So all right, so instead of port 8080, I'm just gonna close all of this and then paste this one here. So it's gonna be 8081. All right, and then if you copy the whole thing here, all right, so now we're gonna port forward 8082 as well. So we are port forwarding two ports at the same time, and then it should work. So it's gonna be same for if you want to add another port. So we could have added another port. This is a port for MySQL, so this is running a database in a internally or locally, and then this is, I think, a MongoDB port. All right, so we're just gonna leave all these ports, but if you want to access all of them, you have to put all of them this way. So this is the first port you are port forwarding, this is the second port. All right, so if you have another third port, you put it here. So we're just gonna see if this will work for these two ports, and if it does, we should be able to replicate for any number of ports that we want to expose or access. All right, so I'll put a password. All right, so now this have been port forwarded. Let me check. Okay, so we have 8081 and 8082 have been port forwarded. So let's try and see if we can access them. So let's try 8081 first. Yeah, you see that now we can access 8081, and then let's try for 8082. Yeah, good, we are able to access 8082 as well. So basically that is it about local port forwarding using SSH. So you can see that here we didn't install any tool. SSH is on almost every Linux machine, so it's a binary which is already in the system. You don't need to download any external tool to do local port forwarding using SSH. All right, so let's say the part one, I think we are done. So our next video, our next session is we're gonna do part two, where we use a chisel to do the same thing we did for part one, that is a local port forwarding using chisel. Thank you for watching, and like and subscribe.